What's up, grinders? So today we're going to be checking out this video here from 说中文, and it's called Don't Memorize Chinese Tones, Train Your Ears Instead. Now, I actually followed this YouTuber long ago when I first started Chinese because, well, she was one of the big ones, and she's just got a really nice personality overall, and she provides good content. So if you're just starting out learning Chinese, I recommend you go actually check out her channel. Now, for me, I've never seen this video of hers, and in fact, I never really had to learn tones in this way because my wife is Chinese, and she came into it when I first started learning Chinese with that mentality of, if you screw up, I will make sure you fix this. It's not like the Western mentality of, I won't provide error correction until someone actually asks. It was like, you're wrong, you must fix this. So she was smashing me constantly on the tone. So although I am not fluent, I'm conversational around the house type of things, my tones are very clean and very easy to understand for a native.
Hello everyone, I'm Shuo. Welcome back to 说说 Chinese, 说说中文. Today I want to share something that highly possibly you have never heard of. It might be the best way and the only way for you to master the Chinese tones. Needless to say, tones are crucial for Chinese pronunciation.
Yeah, whenever I see a YouTuber say, oh, don't worry about the tones, we'll just kind of pick it up as we go along, they have no clue what they're talking about. You have to focus in on this. As adult learners, I'm sorry, maybe someone out there's got a really musical ear and they can pick up these things, but for us, we have to practice them. And for me, I was actually able to say all the tones perfectly long before I could actually hear them clearly. I can hear them clearly now, although there are times in, fast fluent speech where I'll be like, oh, I wasn't sure what the tone on that one was type of thing. But overall, you're gonna have to actually practice these things. It's not one of those things with a European language where you can kind of skip by and work on that later type of thing. You want to focus in on this and then combine this with the unique sounds that Chinese has for most foreign learners. You don't want to be messing these two things up. No one will understand you. It will be frustrating as hell.
Let me elaborate it with a voice message of my mother speaking Mandarin.
Oh, 好好好好好，妈妈高兴。
Oh, she's saying, okay, mum is happy.
好，女儿，下学
So, daughter, okay, daughter.
女儿赚了姐姐给我买东西，我好高兴。
She's saying something about, she's going to buy things. She's quite happy.
You may notice that her
Yeah, she was not speaking Mandarin there. She was speaking some local dialect.
pronunciation of each syllable are not perfect. For example, daughter, 女儿,
女儿
to buy things, 买东西.
买东西买东西。
But I guess most Chinese people can still understand her.
So here's the thing, okay, and this annoys me to goddamn death. I have spent years of my life learning Mandarin Chinese. And I'm happily listening into my wife's conversation with her parents and don't understand anything for years. So I was like, that's okay. I'm just shit at Mandarin Chinese. I understand that. It's just going to take time. And then I'll jump online and I'll watch videos of Mandarin Chinese and I'll be like, but I understand this. And the problem is that every time they get together, they speak with their local dialect where the tones completely change, words change, they speak basically a different version of Chinese. It's not like Mandarin standardized Chinese, and it's a massive goddamn pain in the ass because I'll always be like, 说普通话, and they'll be like, okay, and then they'll swap, and then slowly they'll start to merge back into their local dialect, so it'll just start to disappear to me again. So I'm constantly in this state of being like, 说普通话.
Mainly because all of her tones are correct. In another word, 很高兴认识你 is easier to be understood by Chinese people than 很高兴认识你.
That's an interesting observation. I'm not sure if that's actually true or not. Maybe for a native, but definitely not for a secondary speaker or someone who's learnt the language like me. If you mess up the tones or you mess up the pronunciation, I just lose that word.
Okay, so now you know that Chinese tones are important. How do you study them? Here's how people usually study the Chinese tones.
我
喜欢
喜欢吃
苹果
That is some terrible text-to-speech right there.
苹果我喜欢吃苹果
Yeah, so the issue here is clearly, for one, that the Chinese tones actually change based on the tones around them. Like, you learn this pretty early on, and in that example there, she wasn't changing them, she was just, like, practicing them in isolation and then adding them together without, like, any of those changes that are actually happening.
As you can see, you may be able to repeat the correct tones of one or two words. But when it comes to a complete sentence, you're gonna mess up. Also, as you know, there are countless Chinese words. It is impossible for you to memorize all of them.
What you're going to end up actually doing once you move a little bit down the road is you're going to realize that there's patterns for these tones. So like most words consist of actually two words themselves, so you will learn the tone as a group. So you'll learn, let's say, 苹果, like you'll learn that there's lots of words that go up and then down, up. And then you just practice that pattern, and then as you encounter new words that have that pattern, you'll just impose that pattern upon those words.
That's why memorizing the tones or taking notes of them won't work. After talking to some of my students who speak Chinese almost like native speakers, I found out they have something in common. And that is, they all had spent a fairly long time on pronunciations exclusively.
This is why I say, like, at the beginning, you want to focus on your pronunciation and get that down pat, specifically for a language like Chinese. I'm sure it's the same with, like, lots of other languages, especially tonal languages. But this is, tonal languages they just chuck, like, a wrench into the works type of thing. Like, I'm looking at Spanish as I'm part of this Dreaming Spanish challenge, and then, like, you know, I've looked at Latin and stuff with, you know, the elongated vowels and things like that. Those are things you can kind of just hear and, you know, pick up as you go kind of thing, although you do want to practice them, obviously. But, like, there's just something about tones that make life more difficult.
Of course, they also learn grammar and vocabulary. But other than that, they would set a separate time working on pronunciations and tones only. I will show you a specific...
I haven't done that in a long time, just focusing on tones only. But I'm guessing this is, like, more for a beginner.
Example, which I think you can copy if you want to improve your Chinese pronunciations to a completely different level. First step, find a pinyin chart. I normally recommend my students to use Yo-Yo Chinese pinyin chart, which I will link in the description. The chart includes all the possible pinyin syllables and the 4 tones for each syllable. Step 2. Listen to every syllable and imitate the sounds.
So I never did this, and I'm not saying that this is a bad thing. I just want to provide like a counter example of what I did. And you can take this or take what she says and, you know, run with it. So I learned how to say like one specific word correct. So it'd be like 喜欢. So I learned how to say that, okay? And then as I learned that, I kind of felt, you know, how the tongue and the throat and everything moves. And then as I learned another word that used those same tones, so it's 2 characters and it has the same tones, basically a third and then a first, I would then just practice it with the pronunciation of this other word. And then by doing that, I was basically able to just get all the other words correct. As long as I could get that pattern right for that first one, I could then just superimpose that pattern onto other words. And most words follow, like, there's only so many patterns you need to learn in Chinese, and you can pick them up all pretty quickly. But if you get it right the first time, you can use that reference one that you've got right for all the other times you start encountering other words that have those patterns, and eventually it just kind of becomes more natural in a way.
Listen to them until you can tell the tones immediately.
But here is one thing that will like still happen to me to this day. And that is when I get like excited when I'm talking. Sometimes my tones will just, I don't know what happens. It's like suddenly everything just offsets and I just screw up everything, like all tones at once. And even though I've practiced these words like thousands of times with their specific tones, sometimes it's just like my brain's like, we're going to make up new tones. But like that only happens when I get like really emotional.
马 third. 人 second. This might take 1 to 2 months or more, depends on your own situation.
Yeah, that makes about sense. Like, I spent probably about 3 months on tones, but like, I wasn't intentionally just on tones. It was like I was trying to learn the most basic words, and every time I'd say them wrong, I would be corrected by my wife. And then she would say, like, when I started saying a new word, she's like, why are you messing that up? It's basically the same as this word, it's just different sounds. The tones are the same. And that's where I was like, oh, oh, okay, well, I'll just say that word with the different sounds, and then like, boom, like I got that down pat pretty quickly. One other thing I do want to say as part of this, you want to make sure you get down the certain sounds, like the X, the Q, the J, they're basically all the same sound. It's just like different like stoppages of air and stuff like that. And then the R sound, these are like really crucial. You need to get these sounds.
After that, you can start listening to and imitating words with more than one syllable. Maybe the words you learned with your teacher today.
And also, if you're using Anki and you're listening to audio cards, and that's using like actually, a good text-to-speech as opposed to the one we heard at the beginning there, the tones are going to be very clear. And as you hear this, you're going to get very clear tones. The one major issue actually listening with lots of content online for Mandarin is that native speakers will often mix their local accent with Mandarin. And that's going to cause you, if you rely purely on that, to have tones from all sorts of weird accents going on. Now, maybe that's cool with you. Maybe you're happy with that, or maybe you want to focus on one local accent. I don't care. But for me, I just want to have a standardized accent where people can understand me. Now, obviously, I'm not going to sound like a native because very few people in China speak with like just a Mandarin accent, unless they're like two people coming from two different regions and they're just trying to communicate and they're having a struggle of a time. A good example of this would be someone from, northeast China, say Shandong region, going down to Chongqing. Like there, they will have to literally use Mandarin because like it becomes a struggle just to like understand each other's local dialects. So just listening to content to try and get the tones is probably not the best way to do it. You might want to actually just use text-to-speech engines with audio cards.
开始 first and third. 准备 third and fourth. 复习 fourth and second. Remember, what you need to do is to just tell the tones. And you don't need to memorize which tones exactly they are.
Yeah, also, when you learn words, don't learn them as in individual pieces, as in, this is the word, it sounds, and then this is the tone. The first time you learn it, make sure you learn it all as just one single unit.
Just listen and imitate. When you get more and more comfortable with the words, you can start listening to and imitating longer sentences.
今天天气真好。
Oh, really? The weather's great? No, it's not. It's trash at the moment.
今天天气真好。
我还没有开始准备。
我还没有开始准备。
Also, this is another thing. Once you start having longer sentences, the tones actually, they can change. And you'll learn about this early on when you're getting into Chinese. They can change based on the tones around them. So this is something else you kind of just have to get used to over time and also practice. So even though you're learning a word with its specific tones, there are instances where those tones can change.
Since you already had the preparation from...
But also, the changes actually make sense. Like, I'm not saying it's an arbitrary change. I mean, like, you can see naturally why that change happens because it actually would be too difficult and too, like, jarring to keep those tones as they were. But when these two words roll together and the tones change, it makes sense because it's literally just easier to pronounce that way.
Step 2, this step might be really short, perhaps just 1 or 2 weeks. And now it's time for us to harvest. After this training,
time for us to harvest? Okay.
Your ears become much more sensitive to the Chinese tones. From now on, for the word to start,
开始
only 开始 makes sense to you. Other sounds like 开始, 开始
Yeah, I can see what she's getting at here. But your ears will get better at hearing mispronounced tones as actual, like, the words themselves as well, because in some local dialect, I guarantee you they say it like that.
Are just noises. You will notice that you don't need to know what tones they are to say the correct words or sentences. Because there is only one possibility, there's only one correct answer.
She's actually wrong about this, but she's looking at this from a standard, 普通话, like standard Mandarin perspective. When you speak with actual natives, there is not one standard. Like, they will vary depending on local accent and region. And the number of people who speak in pure, like, just Mandarin, like, it depends where you are, okay? It will go up, it will go down, some people will change for you, some won't. Basically, the idea is that they pretty much swap to this mainly if they're in a formal environment, or if they feel like this will improve communication because the local dialect's, not helping.
Also because you have a pair of Chinese ears now. But of course, this training is tough. It needs commitment. If you don't really care about the perfect pronunciation as long as other people understand you, it's not a must to try it.
I would say it is a must to get the tones down straight, not necessarily to follow her system, but if there's one thing you want to spend a lot of time on, it's tones. I cannot stress this enough. You want to spend time on this. Everything else, characters and all this other stuff, that's all great later on. But if you do not get the tones down, you will be in a world of hurt. I've read threads where there was this guy who was like raging online. He's like, you can't master Chinese. I've been living in China for 5 years and I go to the shop and I order something and they look at me confused and they keep giving me the wrong thing because they can't hear my tones when I'm pronouncing my tones. No, you're not. No, you're not. You think you are, but you've never actually put in that time, and now you've actually really cemented, like, really bad pronunciation. And it's one of those things you can actually quite avoid if you just put in the time beforehand, but it's boring. Like, I get that. It's super boring focusing on tones a lot at the start because you feel like you're making no progress, but trust me, it's important.
But if you really want to improve your tones and pronunciations, this method can definitely help you. Or if you're like me, when speaking a foreign language, you don't need to speak exactly like a native speaker, but you also don't want to be too far off.
Yeah, so I agree with that, but also languages like English are more forgiving in this fact. So with Chinese, the tones can vary quite a bit. And like what we're focusing on here is, getting the standard accent. However, the tones will vary in expected ways for like a local accent. If yours vary just randomly, you're not going to be understood, and you may actually start saying things that are completely different to what you think you're saying because it will literally change the meaning of the word. So it's not like it's just an arbitrary change that can happen locally in certain areas. No, there's obviously like certain conventions of like differences compared to the standard accent.
Here's another super important thing for you to keep in mind. Guess what is it? Leave your answers in the comments and I will share my answer with you in my next video. I'm Shuo from 说说中文. I will see you in my next video. 再见.
Okay, so yeah, if you want to learn Chinese, her channel is actually really good. She's really good for like people just starting out. I watched a fair bit of her content back in the early days type of thing. And then I started, moving on to a lot of different other channels. So it's been a while since I've seen her channel, but she has a very good channel, but it's not like an immersion channel. Like her channel's all about like the finer points of the language and the details and things like this. Anyway, that's pretty much it. If you guys have enjoyed this, let me know in the comments below and I'll see you all in the next video. And if you're not there, I will choke you out.